The dollar empire, the invisible power running the world. For most of human history, power was always clearly visible. Armies marching across deserts, fleets of warships covering the oceans, massive stone fortresses, thrones placed in the middle of royal palaces. Power had shape, it had sound, it carried the smell of war. But in the modern world, power does not always appear with the sound of guns. Sometimes it arrives in silence, not on battlefields, but inside financial trading rooms, not through invasions, but through contracts, not with bombs and bullets, but with a decision to freeze a bank account. In today's world, a country can be suffocated, not by an army, but by a global financial system. And at the center of that system is the US dollar. At first glance, the dollar is only the currency of the United States, a piece of paper printed with the faces of presidents, a unit of payment like any other currency. But that is only the surface. At a deeper level, the dollar is no longer just money. It is the language of global trade. It is the infrastructure of the international financial system, and in many cases, it is the most powerful instrument of power the United States possesses. When people talk about American power, they often think about aircraft carriers, military bases, alliances like NATO, Hollywood film studios, or the technology giants of Silicon Valley. But there is a truth that is mentioned far less often. In many decisive moments of modern history, the power of the United States did not begin with the military. It began with money. The dollar does not only run the American economy, it runs the circulatory system of the entire world. Can a currency rule the world? In ancient empires, to dominate the world, people had to occupy territory, collect taxes, control trade routes, and maintain order through violence. But in the age of globalization, an empire does not necessarily need colonies. It can dominate through the financial system. A currency, if powerful enough, can do things that in the past only armies could do. It can force other nations to follow the rules, make their economies dependent on a system they do not control, punish a country without firing a single bullet. That is exactly what has happened with the dollar. The dollar was not the first international currency. Before it there were the British pound, gold, and silver, and many currencies of earlier trading empires. But the dollar is the first currency in modern history to reach an unprecedented level of power, a national currency that became the financial infrastructure of the entire planet. When a currency reaches that position, it no longer simply reflects the strength of a country. It begins to amplify that strength on a global scale. The dollar, therefore, is not just a symbol of American wealth. It is an instrument of American power. The language of global trade. The first layer of the dollar's power lies in trade. Goods move across the world. Container ships leave Asian ports for Europe. Oil flows from the Middle East. Metals, wheat, natural gas, microchips, machinery. A massive network of trade operates every day. But behind most of those transactions stands the same unit of pricing. The dollar. A Korean company selling goods to Brazil may quote prices in dollars. An African country importing fuel often has to pay in dollars. A European bank calculating global trade risks also references the dollar. Even when the United States is not involved in the transaction, the dollar is still present, like an invisible intermediary. That is the power of the language of trade. Whoever controls the language of commerce controls the structure of exchange. When oil and basic commodities are priced in dollars, the whole world is forced to hold dollar reserves, borrow dollars, pay in dollars, and operate trade inside a system where the United States stands at the center. The dollar becomes the circulatory system of global trade, and whoever controls the circulation holds the power of life and death, the hidden infrastructure of global finance. If trade is the visible layer, finance is the underground layer. Deeper, more dangerous, and far more powerful. Trade is only goods crossing borders. Finance decides who gets loans, who gets rescued, who has liquidity, and who gets suffocated. The dollar dominates not only because it is used to buy goods, it dominates because it sits at the center of foreign exchange reserves, bond markets, cross-border banking systems, and the safe assets of the world. When crises occur, the world does not run toward weak currencies. They run toward the dollar. When war erupts, when inflation surges, when local currencies collapse, governments, banks, investors all turn to the dollar. That reveals a very large truth. The dollar is not only money, it is the refuge of global trust. When money becomes a weapon, many people think money is a soft tool, not as sharp as weapons, but that is only true When money is not at the center of the system, when the dollar becomes the center, it turns into hard power. Because any modern economy needs international payments, correspondent banking, capital markets, credit, trade insurance. And when most of that system is tied to the dollar, the United States possesses an extremely rare ability in history to punish adversaries without firing a shot. A country can be having its assets frozen, cut off from dollar liquidity, removed from the international banking system, and within a short time, its economy can begin to suffocate. At this level, the dollar resembles a strategic instrument of economic siege, the historical moment when the dollar rose. But this power did not appear by accident. At the beginning of the 20th century, the world had another financial center. London. The British pound dominated global trade. The British Empire controlled shipping routes, and London was the financial capital of the world. But history changed. 2 world wars destroyed Europe's economies. Industrial cities were flattened, old empires weakened. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, a new power rose, the United States. When the war ended, the U.S. possessed the largest industrial economy in the world, the largest gold reserves in the world, and the position of global creditor. The economic power of the world shifted from London to Washington. The conference that shaped the world. In 1944, 44 countries met at a small resort in New Hampshire. This meeting was called the Bretton Woods Conference. Their goal was to build a new financial order. The new system rested on a simple principle. The dollar was linked to gold. Other currencies were linked to the dollar. This meant that the dollar became the bridge between gold and the entire international monetary system. At the same time, 2 powerful institutions were created, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. From that moment, the dollar was no longer just American money. It became the pillar of the global economic order, the shock of 1971. But this system did not last forever. By the early 1970s, the amount of dollars in the world had become larger than the gold reserves of the United States. And in 1971, Richard Nixon made a shocking decision. He ended the convertibility of dollars into gold. This event became known as the Nixon Shock. Many believed the dollar would collapse, but the opposite happened. The era of the petrodollar. After 1971, the United States built a new pillar, the petrodollar. Through strategic agreements with Middle Eastern countries, oil, the most important energy resource in the world, was priced in dollars. This created a powerful loop. Countries need oil. To buy oil, they need dollars. To obtain dollars, they must participate in the American financial system. And oil revenues flow back into U.S. financial markets, a mechanism that is almost perfect. The dollar empire. Today, the dollar is no longer just a currency. It is the infrastructure of the global financial system. Most international trade uses dollars. Most foreign reserves are dollars. The safest bond market sits in the United States. In every crisis, one pattern repeats. Investors do not run away from the dollar. They run toward the dollar. Dash, the deepest truth. But when we look deeper, we see something important. The dollar is not the source of American power. The dollar is the result of American power. Behind every dollar stands a massive economy, the deepest financial market in the world, a military system protecting global trade routes, a rule of law system that creates trust, and an intellectual ecosystem that produces innovation. From top universities to technology hubs, from research institutes to startup companies, all of it forms a machine of continuous innovation. It is that machine which allows the American economy to sustain its strength. And when the American economy remains strong, the dollar remains at the center of the world. Tash conclusion. From afar, the dollar looks like only a currency. But when viewed more closely, it is the language of trade, the circulatory system of global finance, an instrument of geopolitical coercion, and an extension of American power. It represents a very new form of power in human history, an empire that does not need to plant its flag on every land, yet still makes the entire world operate within its financial orbit. That is the dollar empire.